Shavua Tov, good morning and good evening. My name is Paul Bloom, and I'm going to be your moderator for the Fairlawn Israel Inspiration Initiative. Uh, each one of you here today are making a major step in the evolution of your family. Uh, by coming to this, you are showing your interest in making Aliya. The Israel Inspiration Initiative, which is coordinated with Nefesh, Mizrahi, and the National Council of Young Israel, is here to give you chizuk. It's here to inspire you to continue on your decision-making process when it comes to Aliyah. Now, I'd like to thank the people who are part of the board of the Israel Inspiration Initiative, Rabbi Przhansky, Rabbi Billet, Dr. Markowitz, Dr. Rani Wachtel, and Esquire Marty Knecht. I'd also like to thank Rabbi Andrew Markowitz and Brian Scher, who have taken the leadership role in bringing together the Fairlawn community and having an ongoing discussion around Aliyah at their shul. When I spoke to both Brian and Rabbi Markowitz, they said they wanted to focus initially on young marrieds, ages 20 to 35, who have or are planning to have children. And they had three major issues that we're going to address today. One is the area of affordable housing in Anglo areas. The second one is around occupations and professional opportunities in Eretz Israel. And the third really one is around the educational opportunities for the children. So let me quickly go through the agenda. This morning, Rabbi Markowitz is going to give some words of chizuk, followed by Rabbi Judah Mishel, the very well-known author and head of Chask. We'll talk about why Aliyah. We're then going to move on to looking at some affordable new Anglo communities. Rabbi Goldin from Mizrahi will discuss their initiative around new Anglo communities. And we actually have two Ravs from two of those communities, Rabbi Felberg from Harish and Rabbi Grossman from Karmei Gad. We'll then move to the next area, which will be the professional inspiration. And we are very honored to have Michael Eisenberg, one of the premier VCs in Eretz Israel, who will talk about occupations within Eretz Israel and the importance of working in Eretz Israel. Probably the most important presentation that you hear today will be from Yaffa Eisenberg, because she's going to give you a little different perspective, a perspective of a mother raising a family in Eretz Israel. So it's really our honor to have Yaffa with us. We're then going to move to the educational opportunities, and Rafi Shulman is going to give us an overview of education for children in Eretz Israel. And we were also privileged to have two principals of yeshivas and seminaries in Eretz Israel, Rabbi Freedman from Mamat Beit Shemesh Aleph and Rochelle Maron from Modi'in. In addition to just the educational opportunities, it's really very important that there's a support structure for the children after school. So Rabbi Yosef Ginsberg will describe the things that they are doing at NCSY Israel. And at the very end, we'll have Marc Rosenberg from Nefesh kind of talking about making it happen, answering some of your questions that you may have. And if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box, and we will collect them, and we'll ask Marc to respond to some of those questions that were submitted previously. We actually gave out to many of the speakers, and they will address some of those issues as well. Without further ado, let me pass on the microphone to Rabbi Markowitz of Fairlawn of Shari Torah.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on which side of the ocean you're on. I wanted to really thank Paul Bloom and Brian Scher for putting together this amazing lineup this morning. I thank all our speakers. They'll be sharing different perspectives about the ability to make Aliyah, Bezrat Hashem, this morning. I also want to just thank Marc Rosenberg, because I think this initiative was partially based on a lot of conversations that Marc, myself, and my wife Sarah had over the past few years. And Baruch Hashem, over 80 people signed up to hear this morning's presentation. It's Erev Shavuos. Everyone's got a lot of things going on, and it shows how important Aliya is and how much it's really on our minds. I had this list to spend 2 years, really very little to gain from me. I'm still living in America. There's a lot of people here that are going to be living in Israel and made that decision and changed their lives and the lives of their children really forever. So I'm just going to share a little bit from my thoughts. The Ramban at the end of Parshas, at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, tells us something very, very controversial, and maybe perhaps very dangerous. The Ramban tells us that that all mitzvos kept in Chutz La'aretz are really a hechsher mitzvah. They're preparatory mitzvos. The mitzvos done in Eretz Yisrael are the real deal, the right way they should be done. And when I spent time in Grus, I learned under Rabbi Rakefet. I asked him, what is the deal with this Ramban? How can you make sense of this Ramban? It's a hechsher mitzvah. That's a very dangerous thing to say. So he said the following. I remember his Purim, it was Leil Purim. So a little bit in jest, I asked him this question, but he gave a really profound answer. He said that in Chutz La'aretz, we need to perform mitzvos to maintain our Jewish identity. Without this, then we would just get subsumed within the culture of where we're living. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen over the past, many, many years in America and all over Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, you get to live your most natural expression as being a Jew, as being a person, and connect with the land, with the people, and with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in a very, very real way. And he says maybe that's really what the Ramban means here. It's not necessarily a hechsher mitzvah, but when you're doing the mitzvah in mitzvos in Eretz, in Chutz La'aretz, it's as a defensive mechanism. You need to do them because otherwise you would just get caught up. But it's not coming naturally. And we're beginning this conversation here. Many people have a lot of different questions and a lot of different reasons and valid reasons to not make Aliyah, to not make that decision for yourself and for your family. But I think we're living in the times right now where everyone must have that conversation with one's spouse, with one's family about let's try it. Let's try it. Let's see how this can play itself out. Sometimes the answer is going to be no, and we can't do it because we have aging parents, and we have we're concerned about this or that. But right now we need to have the conversation, over the upcoming Yontif, at a Shabbos meal, late at night, with our spouse, with our family, because Kiva Moed, we have this opportunity not just to be part of Jewish past or Jewish presence, but to be part of Jewish destiny is really part of making Aliyah. And big yasher koach for everybody for coming out today and opening up this conversation. And I really send it back to Paul. I forgot to thank Brian Scher also, who's been the co-chair of this event and really worked very, very hard behind the scenes to get everything done. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Markowitz. Let me pass it on to Rabbi Judah Mishel to talk a little bit about why Aliyah.
Hi, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you. Usually the rule in our house is my wife, I'm not allowed to speak on anybody's behalf, but on behalf of I guess Jewish history and Jewish destiny and common sense and prophecy and the entirety of the axis upon which the entirety of God's will in the world rests. Thank you, Brian and Paul and everybody for being here and for putting this together. There was an anecdote that I just thought of earlier today about that took place in the mid-50s when a young man named Shimshon Stock was turning bar mitzvah, lived in Crown Heights. His father was close to the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and decided he wanted to take his kid to get a bracha, to get a good word from the Rebbe for his bar mitzvah. And the previous Rebbe had left the world, and the young Rebbe Menachem Mendel had kind of just assumed Nesius, and they knew him as the Rebbe's son-in-law. So they had access. They had very friendly, comfortable, easy access. And this kid came to the young Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was talking to him a little bit about what it means to be a bar mitzvah, what it means to be someone who is responsible, someone who's counted, somebody who's counted on. what it means to be somebody who fulfills mitzvos, all the kind of typical stuff that you talk to bar mitzvah boy about. And then he asked him, like, typical American kid. So, you a baseball fan? He said, sure. He lived in Brooklyn in the 50s. He said, yeah, I'm a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. Of course, it was either the Yankees or the Dodgers at that point. The Mets hadn't yet been born. And so the Rebbe said, oh, very nice. You're a Dodgers fan. So, your father ever take you to a game? You ever see a game? He said, sure. In fact, we went to a game just a couple weeks ago. We saw the Dodgers play. He said, wow, that's great. How was the game? And he said, the truth is it wasn't such a great game. It was a blowout. And, already by the seventh inning, the Dodgers were down by a lot. So, we kind of left. We didn't stay to the end. So the Rabbi asked this young man, this young Shimshon, he said, did the players also leave? So he said, no, the players didn't leave. The players are on the field. They have to be at the game. Like, but so the Rabbi said, how did you leave? Aren't you like a Dodgers fan? So the kid said, yeah, but that's not the way it works. Like the players in the field, they have to be there. They're there. They're the game, and we're just kind of watching. So we're able to come and go. So the Rebbe looked at him and said, you're becoming a bar mitzvah. You're going to be counted as part of Klal Yisrael and the minyan. To know that there are players and there are fans in this world. In this world, there are players who are on the field, who are participants, and there are fans who are spectators. And it's your choice to decide whether you're going to be on the field or whether you're going to be in the stands, whether you're going to be a player or you're going to be a spectator. He said in Yiddishkeit, the main thing is to be a participant. The main thing is to be a player on the field. You don't want to be a spectator in Yiddishkeit. So I, with all due respect to this wonderful program and the title of my little nugget here, my section of why Aliya, the question for an aware, educated, thinking Jew whose finger is on the pulse of Jewish history and life is not why Aliya, but why not? Meaning the question really is the other way. The question is why am I not attaching myself to the rhythm of God's will in the universe? Bereshis bara Elokim, the beginning of creation. Rashi tells us is koach masa v'gila amo. The Ribono Shel Olam set into motion a system and a plan for humanity in which every person has a place and every nation has a place. And in order for God's will to be fulfilled in its ultimate sense, Am Yisrael must dwell in its land. So the question is not why Aliya. The question is why Fairlawn or Teaneck or the Five Towns or not. I don't want to be presumptuous and ask why Boynton Beach. Like I'm not that Fabrent over here. But why is the question? Why is there even a question? And like Rabbi Markowitz said, this is not like something that we in the middle of the night or right now packing our bags and have to run away. But anyone with their pulse on Yiddishkeit wants for us and for our children, for our grandchildren, for our nation to be. We want to be participants. We want to be on the field. We want to be in the game. We want to be the story, not something that we're watching unfold from the sidelines. Soloveitchik spoke about the consecration of yearning, about concretizing, making real, not just leaving our words like the Kuzari says, chirping like a bird and benching, talking about Yerushalayim and talking about Shivat Zion and talking about Zionism, talking about Eretz Yisrael, but to concretize it, to make it real, to kind of Imlo Ales Yerushalayim al Rosh Simchati, to make Yerushalayim and our focus of the potential for living in Aliya, making Aliya something very real. Now it's not just having Jewish symbols and Jewish art and Israeli music and eating falafel, but it's meetings like this, and it's creating facts on the ground, and it's printing out Nefesh B'Nefesh application and leaving it on the kitchen table, and having it be part of the dinner conversation, and having it be a conversation with kids, whatever stage of life they're in, about our futures and our lives and our intentions and our goals facing Eretz Yisrael, not just our bodies facing the land of Israel when we daven. Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelevich, the great builder of Torah in the land of Israel, about which the Kloisenberg Rebbe said, if a Jew learns Tosfos anywhere in the United States of America, it's in the merit of Reb Shraga Feivel. Reb Shraga Feivel lived his entire life focused on the land of Israel. And while he built Torah Masorah and so much of the Mostos in the United States, his entire life was lived as an Eretz Yisrael Yid, a person whose life was completely subsumed with a love of and a desire to get to the land of Israel. He said, living in Chutz La'aretz is kind of like being a polar bear in the Bronx Zoo. You go to the Bronx Zoo and you go to see the polar bears. They create a little bit of like an environment for it. They pump in cold air and make a little Arctic enclosure, and it kind of looks nice and it's cool. And they fishicles, they freeze Arctic fish and put it there so he can keep his claws kind of sharp and eat and enjoy. But it's all fun and games, all beautiful. But if you take a step back and another step back, it's like you realize it's 94 degrees, it's humid. What on earth is a polar bear doing in the middle of the Bronx? Like there's graffiti and Spanish music playing. Like what is it doing over here? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Like an Erev and wonderful Mostos and beautiful shul and a wonderful community and great kosher Chinese in Fairlawn and great people and tzaddikim all around. But if you take a step back and another step back and another step back and look at the context, not just of the geography of it, but like where we are in history and what the opportunities that we have that our grandparents and great-grandparents couldn't have dreamt of. The question is not why Aliya. The question is like when Aliya, and how Aliya, and how am I going to do this, and where am I going to live, and I think that there's some wonderful panelists who are going to help try to steer that conversation. But Ashreinu and Ashreichem that you're here today. This is a fulfillment of incredible prophecy and incredible promise, and Hashem should help you and yours and all of us to make Aliyah and keep making Aliyah. It's possible, it's pragmatic, it's practical, it's realistic, and it's the greatest privilege and pleasure in the entire world. It's the most natural thing and the most beautiful thing, and looking forward to meeting and greeting everybody here.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mishel. Let me pass it on now to Rabbi Goldin, who's going to talk about some of the affordable new Anglo communities and some of the work that Mizrahi and Young Israel are actually doing together.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Paul. And again, Yasher Koch, Rabbi Paul, and to everyone who organized this. Real privilege to be here with the rest of this distinguished panelists list. And thank you for the opportunity. So just by way of introduction, I'm really not going to share a lot of the details, but just to kind of frame the conversation about affordable New England communities, just to give a little bit of a bigger picture. So I have been zochet to live with my family. This summer will be 17 years, Baruch Hashem, which is pretty hard to believe. And when I reflect personally upon the growth or the size or the overall Anglo communities that existed when I first made Aliyah, and look at where they are now, it's unbelievable. If you want to pick the main areas, what you would call the main, I guess currently the main Anglo areas, the Gush Etzion, Beit Shemesh, Modi'in, Ranana. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out here. I don't want to insult anybody, but when I reflect upon what those communities were when I first made Aliyah and where they are right now, it's really, really, really amazing. Baruch Hashem, people are coming, and they're coming in droves, and they're coming inspired, wanting to make a difference. And it's really, really been amazing to see each of these communities continue to grow. And what's happened aside from that is obviously also the establishment of new communities. Because number one, people, there's the need, there's no reason why everyone has to stay specifically in the major areas, in the major communities, and of course the issue of affordability becomes more of a challenge as communities become more popular. Then the issue of affordability becomes more of an issue. So the first thing I just wanted to share is that in order to help all of these continuously growing Anglo communities and the growth of Anglo communities in general in Eretz Yisrael, both big and small. So Young Israel in Israel and World Mizrahi have come together to create a Shul's Olim network with the purpose of basically connecting all of these communities, connecting the leadership of these communities, the Rabbanim, the lay leaders of each of these communities, to encourage them to share with each other, to help each other, to support each other, with the goal of ultimately enabling all of these communities to be able to support and find the areas where they can help each other in meaningful ways. This is a new project that really only was meant to begin right after Sukkot, and unfortunately was pushed to the side for a little bit, but has really begun in earnest again since Pesach, and we're very excited about the potential. We currently have about 45 communities 45 shuls whose Rabbanim are now talking together, sharing together, and we hope that this will be just the beginning of an opportunity to add to the great work that Nefesh B'Nefesh is doing and complement the incredible work that Nefesh B'Nefesh is doing, to enable these communities to help each other and provide for their constituents and for their congregants. And one of the things we wanted to do here, because there was a specific request to discuss new Anglo communities, was to bring two Rabbanim of two up-and-coming communities, two communities that are a little bit further from what you would call the Anglo centers, but are both well-established communities led by two fantastic Rabbanim. And they're both very much up and coming, and to enable them to just share a little bit about their communities, and to let people know that when you're coming, of course, you can always choose to stay in those communities that are more well established, or you can choose to join one of these up and coming communities that are already somewhat established, and to be able to continue to grow together with the communities. So it's my pleasure to introduce. I guess we'll start with, just because he's first on the list here. Am I doing that right, Paul, or are you going to introduce?
You're right. You're right. Keep on going.
Okay. To ask Rabbi Yehoshua Felberg, who's the Rav of a shul in Harish, just to share a little bit about his community and what's going on there.
Okay, well, thank you, Rav Goldin. And as you said, it just happens to be my name is first on the list, but Rav Grossman, will speak shortly as well, has another amazing community, Kamei Gat, that he's been leading for many years. And, both of our communities are wonderful places for New Olim to be considering when they come up, B'ezrat Hashem, very soon to Israel, and Yasher Koach to Paul and to Rafi, to everyone here who's organized this amazing thing. And thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about Harish and the potential for Aliya that people have to new areas of Israel. So just to say a little bit about myself, my name is Yehoshua Felberg. I'm the Rabbi of Kehillat Derech Eretz, which is the Anglo shul of Harish, about 50 members strong now, Baruch Hashem, 50 families strong, and we continue to grow every week, a mixture of Israelis and Anglos, Olim from South Africa, from North America, from Europe, all coming and finding their home in our little corner of Eretz Israel. Harish itself, 10 years ago, no one had ever heard of. Mamash, it was unknown. And then in that 10 years, like Modi'in in some ways was before it, it's become this very vibrant, quickly growing, very interesting place to be and to develop. It's located about an hour and 15 minutes away from Tel Aviv, about 40 minutes away from Netanya. If you know where Hadera is on the map, you just go straight east and eventually you hit Harish. And it's one of the fastest growing areas of Israel. The population at the moment is about 40,000 people. Ultimately, they want it to be a city of 200,000 people. And it's a particular interest to Anglos because it's affordable, because it's accessible. It's still possible to live in Harish and commute to the Merkaz in order to work, in order to earn a living. But even within Harish and locally, they're looking to develop and increase the employment opportunities as well. So people both are working at home, working in the Merkaz in the center of the country, and are looking at employment opportunities local in Harish itself. Education in Harish is one of the strong points here. It's one of the most wonderful things about the city. Every element, every derech, every zerem, every stream of education you could possibly want is available here, from Torani to more modern Orthodox sorts of education, Chardal, Haredi, Chabad. Everything's available, and not only that, we work very closely as the shul, as the Anglo shul, with the Moatzah, with the local council, to ensure integration of new English speakers into the educational program. So we've had a number of Olim families who've made Aliyah directly to Harish. Most of our families come from other places in Israel and have moved to Harish as part of their journey, but some are coming now directly to Harish. And we work very closely with them, and myself as Rabbi of the community work closely with them to ensure that their children are able to integrate into the programs in the schools, have additional Hebrew lessons as needed. There's always a very careful balance. There's always a very fine line to walk, because of course, on the one hand, we're an Anglo shul, and we want to protect that and be proud of that and continue to offer services to all of our members in English, those who need it, etc., and shiurim in English. That's a very important part of our program. But also we want to make sure that families integrate, become part of Israeli society, become proud Israelis, and that can be a challenge as well. And so we're here with them every step of the way, with their children, with them as adults as well, to help them, to help everybody develop and fit into Israeli society, find their corner of the world. A little very short anecdote that I'll say, one of the reasons we ended up founding the community in the first place in Harish was a number of years ago when I made Aliya myself, some 8, 9 years ago now. The first weekend I spent in Israel, we went to a wedding. And I met a couple there from England. As you can tell, I'm probably the minority here. I'm originally from London, from England. And this couple were friends of my wife that we knew, very vaguely. And I just made Aliya, rose-tinted glasses. Everything was amazing. Straight off the boat. Israel's fantastic. And I said, what's your plans? Where are you going? What are you doing? They said, we're about to make Yerida. We've lived in Israel for 2 years, and now we want to leave. We're going to go back to England. I said, why? They said, we need to find our Yiddishkeit. I said, you need to find your Yiddishkeit. Here you are in Eretz Yisrael, Eretz HaKodesh. How can it possibly be you want to leave? And it was a very sad situation. They had basically been here and they'd been around a few places. They weren't able to find their place. So we set up Kilat Derech Eretz, our shul in Harish, and to try and develop that, to enable people not just to have a physical Aliyah when they come to Israel, but to know they have a helping hand the entire way, to have a spiritual Aliyah. And so that's what it's all about. That's the kavanah of the community. That's the hashkafa of the community. We're open to everyone from every walk of, orthodoxy, and we encourage people to come and live the dream here with us in Harish, in a very growing, very exciting part of the country. One last thing, because I know everyone's very interested about, is affordability. I don't know how much detail people want me to go into, but I'll say very briefly that in Harish, a 3-bedroom apartment now retails about 1.4 million shekel, old houses, 2.5 million shekel, and the brand new, nice, beautiful houses, 3.5 million shekel. I'm sure the other panelists are saying, well, that sounds crazy, a house for 2 million shekel, how such a thing is possible. But here in Harish, these things can still happen. So if people are interested, I'm more than happy to make connections, to speak with people, and to, encourage them on the way. Bezat Hashem. Over to Rav Grossman, my colleague, to tell you all about Karmei Gat.
Thank you, Rabbi Yehoshua. Rav Aminadav, please.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you again to all the organizers. It's really a tremendous privilege to be here with you, especially for myself and the involvement. Thank you, Rabbi Markowitz and Shomrei Torah. I grew up for a number of years in Bergen County, a nearby community. And today in our community, we actually have a number of graduates of Bogrim, of Shomrei Torah in Bergen County, and of course, all across North America and in the world, really. And it's really a privilege to continue in that partnership. You'll hear a lot of similarities between what I'm going to say and what you heard from Rabbi Yehoshua, and about his wonderful community and wonderful vision. And I'll say, I think a lot of what we learned, what we gained, those of us in the community that grew up in communities in Chutz La'aretz that are really Torah-centered communities, that were tight-knit, vibrant, that were growth-focused, informs a lot of what we're trying to do here in Karmei Gat. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am the rabbi of Beit Knesset Karmei Tzion. Karmei Tzion is a shul in the neighborhood of Karmei Gat. Karmei Gat is a neighborhood in the city of Kiryat Gat. And similar, not so different from Harish, we are a brand new neighborhood. Nothing existed. It was really dirt and fields about 7 or 8 years ago. As the country has done in many other places, like Harish has sought to develop more affordable and somewhat accessible locations for housing. And there's been massive development expanding the city of Kiryat Gat. So Kiryat Gat itself maybe was a city of about 50,000 people. Karmei Gat so far maybe has 20,000, 30,000. I think it's planned to probably match the size of Kiryat Gat itself. Altogether, the city, I think, will top 100,000. Today, a good amount has already been completed. The city, our neighborhood, is mostly apartment buildings, but also has some homes, both private homes and 2-family du mishpachti homes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our shul, again, which is my direct involvement, and then I'll circle back a little bit to talk a little bit more about the location as a whole. So Beit Knesset Karmei Tzion, I think about much of the same things that Rabbi Yehoshua mentioned in terms of trying to provide an answer. How do we grow in our ruchnius, in our Yiddishkeit after Aliya? Aliya is an unbelievable high point for myself as well. I made Aliya 9 years ago. From New York, and my goal really is to ensure that we're all growing, and not just growing, but growing in a way that we are together as a community supporting each other. Our community really has a tremendous range. It has a vast majority of English speakers, but we're not defined as an Anglo shul. We have many what I call Yisraelim Batikim, native Hebrew speakers who are not English speakers. We do have some. And even among the Anglos, it really ranges from everything. We have many members who grew up here in Israel, in Beit Shemesh and Modin and Ra'anana, so-called Anglo communities, and also speak English, but themselves also really grew up in Israel. And of course, we also have a smaller amount, but growing, of brand new Olim, and many individuals who come to Karmei Gat as a second, third stop on their Aliyah journeys. More and more, I think it's becoming popular as the first stop. the community, one of the major elements that I think really characterizes a community is that I think it's grown a reputation for being warm and welcoming. We have a welcoming committee for new members. We try to assign buddy families for those who want it. We'll often organize what's called a Kiddush Hekirut, where people can get to know each other. Families are mashed up with other families for Kiddush on a Shabbos morning to get to know each other. And of course, the support throughout life cycle events, B'ezrat Hashem, for Simchas, but also Lo Aleinu, for times in need that are more challenging. The basic details: the shul was founded again 2018. That was the year that the neighborhood started to be settled. People started to live here. It was still dirt there, and within 3 years, the shul was looking for a rabbi, which to me spoke volumes about the values of those founding families. I came into the picture about 3 years ago. 2021 was my first involvement in the shul. At that time, the shul had about 50 member families. Today, Baruch Hashem, the shul has close to 200 families. So we've almost quadrupled in size in about 3 years. Our overall character, language is in Hebrew. Because of that mix of both native Israelis, of people who've grown up here in Israel, and of Olim. So the announcements will be in Hebrew. My drashot, divrei Torah, and shirim are generally in Hebrew. That's the standard. There are shirim offered in English in a wide array of frameworks throughout the community. The character of the shul itself, again, is in Hebrew, and it's from a sense of both keeping the shalom bayit, so to speak, the proper balance between different members, and also the belief of many olim that we want the best way to integrate for ourselves and for our children is also to really try to learn as much as, if you go to a shul kiddush, you'll probably hear more English than Hebrew for sure. Of course, the affordability is a major factor. I'm not a real estate agent, but it is significantly more affordable than most other classic Anglo communities that Rav Yossi mentioned a couple minutes ago. In terms of the location, Kiryat Gat is a little bit farther south. So it's a little bit farther away from the Merkaz, but still accessible. So it's a 40-minute train ride approximately from the center of Tel Aviv. There are many people that commute to work. There are many jobs that enable people to commute 1, 2, 3 times a week to work on a 40-minute train ride, and they work from home the rest of the time. People find that as a great balance. We're about an hour drive away from Jerusalem, half an hour to Beit Shemesh, 45 minutes to Modi'in, 35 minutes to Beersheba. The Kablanim like to call this HaMerkaz HaChadash Al Yisrael, because depending on where your data points are, you can see this as a real center. We have Baruch Hashem, many amenities in the community, many other shuls. We are the shul with the highest concentration for sure of English speakers. There are many other Sephardi shuls locally. That is the largest other, I would say, ethnic population in the neighborhood. We are the only Dati Leumi Ashkenazi shul in the neighborhood. But there are many other shuls. Of course, there's a mikveh. There are 2 shopping centers that are already functioning, all within walking distance in the neighborhood. Another shopping center under construction. There are 2 Dati elementary schools, plus a Chabad elementary school, all within the neighborhood, all within walking distance. There's a girls' Ulpana high school in the neighborhood. And then again, this is only one neighborhood, one area of Kiryat Gat. Just a short 5 to 10 minute drive away is the city of Kiryat Gat, which has many more options to all those. I do want to address just for a moment the question of security. You might have heard south and thought, well, is that safe? My answer to that is yes. Let me illustrate, perhaps by way of example. We had many sirens on Simchat Torah, and it was not easy, although there were really sirens all over the country. Since Simchat Torah, we have only had 1 siren. Somehow, Baruch Hashem, Bli Ayin Hara, it seems to be that we fall between the cracks. Somehow, if there's going to be a major volley, it's going to be trained more towards Ashkelon and Ashdod, Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim, so on and so forth. And so far, we have not seen any greater security risk than I would say any other major population center in this country. Of course, we don't know what the future will bring. We daven, and we have full faith in Hashem's help and in the Kachot HaBitachon that are fighting so hard for us. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we are looking forward to welcoming any potential new members. I'm happy to be in touch if I can be helpful in any way. Thank you so much for joining. Yasher koach.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Grossman, Rabbi Felberg, and Rabbi Goldin. Let me pass it on to Michael Eisenberg.
Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. To be perfectly candid, I can only talk semi-intelligently about the high-tech world. So I will give you some kind of overall guidance and thoughts about the economy. But before I start, I want to comment on something Rabbi Markowitz said earlier with some respect. One of the things I think of finding about professional life in Israel requires actually commitment. It's hard to think of this as an option. One, because employers here want to know you're committed. In fact, rarely would anyone even interview somebody coming here if they don't have a plane ticket, because there's just been too many people who've talked about Aliya and not made it. And second of all, because I think as a mindset, you need to kind of want to be here and you need to be committed, because there will be ups and downs in your professional life in this country. Inevitably, when you move to a new country, to any new country, and for those of you who had immigrant grandparents, you can ask them, they don't come with a professional network, and that's kind of a thing. And you have to find your way into that community. And I don't want to promise you nirvana. I want to promise you that you'll have an incredibly meaningful professional life here, and you'll have incredible opportunity, which I'll come to in a second, but you'll have to push through some struggles. I've set up, in fact, an organization for people who've made Aliya and gotten into high-tech here called Nevo. Part of its approach is to create a professional network for people who moved to Israel and who have kind of committed to this. And we've had any number of people who've been laid off because the high-tech world is up and down and there are layoffs, but who kind of stuck through and then and pushed through and then kind of went on to their next opportunity. So that's kind of high-level point number one. High-level point number two is the vast majority of opportunity right now in this country in the business world is in tech. That doesn't mean it's exclusive, but if 50% of the exports and 24% of the tax receipts of the country is high tech, that's where the vast majority of opportunity is. There are plenty of people who moved here in real estate. There's a bunch of people here in private equity. There are plenty of lawyers and doctors and mechanchim and everything else. But the economic side of this, in large measure, exists in the entrepreneurial or the high-tech community. Entrepreneurial is not necessarily all high-tech, but a large, significant part of it is. The French Aliya that's come here recently has thankfully been entrepreneurial in the food area, and that has significantly improved the food scene, the kosher food scene in particular in Tel Aviv. So there may be opportunities there as well. I think the thing to kind of wrap your head around is this is a young country still with an ever-growing population. There's a little less than 10 million people now. In 20 years, there'll be somewhere between 15 and 20 million people living here. That is incredibly fast population growth, and that creates a lot of opportunity here. And I think when you think about where you want to be and where you want to live economically, it's not a large market like the United States is, but it is a fast-growing market as such, and one which welcomes initiative in a big way. The last thing I'll say on this point is, I don't know how to say this in a nicer way, but the children here and the young people here are significantly more robust. So when you bring your family here and you raise them, they have more verve. I think Rabbi Mishel was alluding to this earlier. They have just incredible resilience that I have not seen in communities of young people in America. And if you're young and have professional opportunity, you have that kind of same resilience and verve, I think you will find an economic home here. I also want to encourage you that when you come here, you do not keep your American job. I think that works for a short period of time for some people. I've had to interact with any number of people who came with an American job and whatever it is, and then after 4 or 5 years at the first downturn, when they're out of sight and out of mind from headquarters in the US, find themselves 5 or 7 years older, but not integrated into an Israeli professional network. And so I would encourage you to integrate as soon as possible into Israel. Everyone here is super welcoming when they know you're coming and when they know you're committed, and will spend any amount of time with you. One of the things I hear from Olim all the time is that they're shocked by how free people are with their time to spend with people who are moving to this country. That is my experience as well, and something that I think you will find here. You also need to know it's a different business culture. And that different business culture, I live here 30 years. My Hebrew is fluent. I've written books in Hebrew. And yet I still find things that I scratch my head about as someone who grew up in the United States. And you just have to be ready for that and get used to it over time. I often say, and Yaffa, who you'll hear from soon, often say that what we pick up between when we're 4 years old and 16 years old is what accompanies us for the rest of our life. And my fourth birthday to 16th birthday happened in New York. And I wouldn't look back or have it any other way, but I think it's important to point that out. And the last thing I'll finish with is when you think about creating a community, a career, you're likely to create a new career in Israel. You will take the skills that you have built along the way. The application of them is likely to be slightly different here. And that requires a flexibility of mind and a commitment, as I said earlier, that it's going to work, because you'll end up making some changes. But I think you'll likely bring sets of skills that are desperately needed in this market. This is, unlike the United States, in this country, having fluent English, written and spoken English, is an advantage, a significant advantage in the business world. Just that alone is a skill set that has values. And when you're familiar with corporate America, or the way things work, or you have a set of relationships that are valuable, that is valuable, and you should trade on that with potential employers here in Israel. And I'll just add one last thing on what Rabbi Mishel said from a religious perspective. When I was 19, I heard Rav Aaron Lichtenstein say, somebody asked him about living and working in America. And my Rebbe Rav Aaron Lichtenstein said the following. He said, here's what I know. If you work in America for General Electric, so you work for General Electric. If you work in Israel for Tadiran, then a big electronics company, so you work for Klal Yisrael. And I think that doesn't matter if you're in chinuch or in business or anything else. When you work in America, you work in a job. When you work in Israel, you work for Klal Yisrael. And I think building that economy, and it's something that Avram Avinu came with when Hashem said to him, Ve'eh bracha, he said, come here, create a lot of bracha. And that bracha is material bracha. Reading Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch and Parshas Toldos and other places. And that's part of your aspiration as an Oleh, is actually to come here and help to create the economy that enables the Jewish people and Klal Yisrael to flourish. And being a part of that in itself, I consider to be just a tremendous chus that I think many generations before us would have given an arm and a leg for. And many of our children and people we know over the last 9 months have given their lives for. And that chus is staring us right in the face. And I think if you let it pass you by, it's worth asking a question before the pearly gates close at Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur this year.
Thank you very much, Michael, for those inspiring words. So let me move on to the Ashes Chayil of this group. Yaffa.
You have no idea.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, I guess I'll start with just a basic introduction, to make it easier for the people who are listening to understand where we both came from. I'm from Elizabeth, and my husband's from Manhattan. I went to Berea, he went to MTA. We both came here for the year, and we actually met in Israel in the summer, went back to America. He was in YU and I was in Stern. And then we got married when we graduated, and we were very determined to come here immediately. We didn't want to get stuck with a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan or a Kita Aleph plan. So we just decided it was easiest to come right away. And, Mitzvah Hashem, to start a family here so our kids can start off basically as Israeli. There are so many things to discuss about raising a family in Israel as Americans. We've been here now for 30 years, so that's a lot to put into 5 minutes. So I think instead of going through the details, I guess I was thinking what would I have wanted somebody to tell me when I was considering coming, and kind of more of a general roadmap as opposed to specific advice. And I'm obviously happy to answer questions from specific people at any point. But I think basically, I think it's natural that when you grow up in a certain environment, you think that's great because that's what you know. And then when you make Aliya, suddenly everything is very different. And I very much look back and remember thinking that everything that I was used to and everything that was American was great. And if it's not like that here, then I wish it could just be more American. And there's a lot different here. And I think after 30 years of being here, I see that, not everything American, although it might be more familiar, it's not necessarily better. And the system here is very different. But there's some things that are difficult about that and some things that are much better about that, truthfully, after raising our kids here. But the system is very different. Kindergarten is not part of elementary school. It's a separate system. The elementary school, I think just to give an example, one of the things that was hard to get used to is, while everybody's so excited, obviously, about moving here and that you can send your kids to public school and not pay any money for Jewish education, you kind of forget that that comes with like the other side of the coin, that it is a public school. And like the teachers, for example, don't work for you. They work for Misrad HaChinuch or for the area. But if you have issues with your teachers, that you can't always necessarily, say, oh, they need to be fired and we'll bring in someone better next year. And so there are a lot of positives and negatives. I think also most Americans are used to a very long school day and very little informal education. That was probably my biggest learning curve in coming to Israel, understanding the importance of informal education here and just the importance of everything outside of school. School in some areas is only till 1:30. There are a lot more chugim. There's a lot more. Also, there are things brought into the school, such as music and dance, but there's also a lot of afternoon activities in the school. And also something that Michael and I learned a lot about. We truthfully made fun of it. I did grow up as a very active member in NCSY in New Jersey, but NCSY in New Jersey, for example, has college age, counselors or advisors, whatever you'd like to call them. And then you come to Israel and your kids go to, the equivalent of NCSY, which is B'nai Akiva or Ezra or Ariel or whatever youth group it is, and the counselors are 15. And suddenly you think it's completely and totally responsible for 25 children to be, led by a 15-year-old. And at first, we were like, we're never doing this. And then ultimately, we obviously did it. And now our 15-year-old, our 30-year-old was a counselor when she was 15. And every single one of our kids ended up doing this. And truthfully, it's incredibly empowering. And it gives them a tremendous sense of achrayus for their community and for Klal Yisrael, at a very young age. And then already that kind of prepares them for the next big learning curve, which is, Army, Sheirut Leumi, at least in the communities that, that we live in here. And that also, like everything, we have 8 children, Kanai Nahara. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. We have 8 children between the ages, and now our oldest is 30, and our youngest is 14, turning 15. We have 4 married children. And just to give an example, I love hearing about all these opportunities of where people have branched out to and go today, because there were really just a handful of communities that Americans felt comfortable moving to in 1993. And I feel like there are Americans everywhere now, all over the country. And there's nowhere that is, feels too far or too isolated. And I think that's amazing. So yeah, our kids, although they're already born in Israel, they were all born in Israel. They're living all over the country, our married kids. And then we have one in the Army. That's also another big learning curve, obviously, this year. We have 5 5 kids in the Army, sons and sons-in-law. 4 have been in Aza, and 1 has been in the Kiryah. So that's obviously another learning curve. So I'm not going to go into all of the different stages of growing up here, but just to summarize it all, I think the best advice that I would give is it's a huge learning curve, and not everything in America is necessarily better. But if you're open to the fact that some kids have a really easy time with Aliya, and it's they're like a fish in water and they love it. And for other kids, it's really, really challenging. But I think as parents, if we have open minds that things are just different here, and it takes a while, it takes a long time for kids to adjust. But, at the end, I think this year is a perfect example. Michael's spoken about it more publicly, but I will say the same, their commitment to Klal Yisrael and the things that they've learned, their commitment, which, for example, as I said, they've learned in their Tnuot Noar, in their youth groups, in which they continue in Sheirut Leumi and in the Army. We have kids who are in Hesder Yeshiva and also in Mechinot, and it's just, but across the board, I have to say that it's just amazing to see how they are completely committed to the greater good and the good of Klal Yisrael, rather than being so focused, as was my experience in America, on your own grades and your own sports stuff that you did and your own summer camp and your SAT scores and getting into college. It's and all in all, it's been a really, really enriching experience, and I'm constantly learning from my children. I think that would pretty much summarize it.
Thank you very much, Yaffa, and you exceeded my expectations.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the educational opportunities for your children. And let me ask Rafi to kind of give an overview, and then we'll go quickly into two of the leading educators in Eretz Israel. Rafi?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rafi Shulman. I'm the co-founder of Alim Advisors. We made Aliya in 2015. We made Aliya from West Orange, New Jersey, a wonderful community, a warm community, and we moved to Israel. And I have to say that while it was challenging in the beginning, if you ask my wife, you ask our 4 kids, they all feel that it was the best decision that we made. And so I just want to commend everybody that's joined this program and encourage you to see this through, because I think at the end of the day, you will feel like it's such a big mitzvah, such a big opportunity for you and for your kids. What I'm going to focus on today is talking a little bit about schools, and I wanted to share with you a few pieces of advice. The first thing is a lot of people turn to us and they ask us for advice about finding communities and finding schools, and they ask us, what should we look for first? Should we look for communities first and then find schools, or should we look for schools and then find communities? And while it's different for every family, the general advice that we give people is look for schools first, especially if your kids are a little older, especially if your kids need certain support, certain services. I think it's important for you to find the school or multiple schools, and then make sure that the community fits your needs. And I think you'll find that most communities, most cities have schools that are appropriate for your kids. But I think if you had to decide which one to focus on first, my recommendation would be to focus on the schools and then make sure that the community is good for your kids and for your family. Now, when it comes to communities and schools, there's so many options, as a lot of the speakers spoke about. You have, in a sense, 3 groups of communities. The first one are the large Anglo communities. And if you look at the top 5, where they're the most Olim kids, it really starts with Bet Shemesh, Yerushalayim, Modi'in, Efrat and Ra'anana. Those are the Anglo bubbles, the Anglo communities. Those communities are the ones that you will find the most Olim families, and very often the schools will have the most support for your kids. The next group of cities are the ones that are a little bit more of a mix. So you look at, for example, Rehovot, or Masker Batya, or Harish, still wonderful communities. A lot of the schools have a lot of support. So I don't want you to think that if you don't go to one of the larger Anglo communities, that your children will be feel like a fish out of water, or they won't have support. One of the things that we found is that if you work with the schools, if you work with the Olim coordinators, if you work with the administrators and the teachers, a lot of times they will find extra support. They'll find a way to get your children Upan hours or social or maybe after school support. So I really encourage you, when you're looking for communities, to really cast a wide net and look at the large Anglo communities, the ones that are more mixed, and also the smaller Yeshuvim that might not have a lot of Anglo kids there, or maybe Anglo families, but a wonderful, warm community. Talking about places like Neria or Alon Shvut. These are communities that some people just want to move to. They want to jump in with both feet. They want to immerse themselves in the Israeli culture. And I think it's wonderful. So I think when you're looking at communities, really, like I said, start with a wide angle. Talk to people in different communities, really get a sense of what lifestyle is like, what the schools are like. But I think they're amazing, amazing schools in all these different types of communities and things, community schools that you should consider. Another piece of advice that I wanted to give you is that, as Yaffa mentioned, you have to recognize that the schools here are different. They're not better or worse, they're just different. So the school day is shorter, but then also most schools go Sunday through Friday. So the kids are in school 6 days. The class sizes are very often bigger, so you could have 30, 35 kids in the class. They're a lot less formal. So, in the States, if there's a parent-teacher conference, you'll get an email 2 weeks, 3 weeks ahead of time. Here, you're lucky if you get a notice a couple of days beforehand. And so things are done differently. And I think one of the things that you'll find is that kids will do well. They'll go from elementary school, they move on to middle school, high school, and then the army or Shirut Leumi, and then they'll start careers. And Baruch Hashem, you'll see that everyone's doing well here. And so when it comes to schools, just recognize that it's different. Come in with open, eyes wide open, and just have realistic expectations. And as Yaffa mentioned, the cost of education here, and in the different communities, is a lot less. And so for a lot of families who are looking at the yeshiva cost, the fact that you can send your kid to a good school in Israel and pay a fraction of the cost is something that is very meaningful to them. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is that I found that if you have a positive attitude as a parent, it will really help you get through those days. And I think if you talk to anyone on the panel, they'll be open in front and tell you that it's not all, happy days, and there'll be some days that are tough and some moments that are tough. And I think if you project that sense of optimism and don't ignore those tough moments, but recognize it and tell your kids and say, okay, you know what? Well, maybe today was tough. Tomorrow's going to be better. Next week's going to be better. Next month's going to be better. I think that positivity, I think that positive approach will really help you and your kids get through the tough days. And at the end of the day, if your kids are happy, then your parents will be happy. So I really want to encourage you guys to continue this journey that you're on. If there's anything that we can do, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help you in any way that we can.
Thank you much, Rafi. So let me introduce Rabbi Freedman from Ramat Beit Shemesh Aleph.
Shalom Aleichem, thank you. Wow, it's a pleasure, a privilege, and an honor to be on such an amazing panel. Thank you very much. I also have the pleasure and privilege of having Rabbi Bloom's grandchildren, grandsons, the Chemo boys, in my cheder here in Ramat Beit Shemesh. So that's good to be a part of it. When I came 25 years ago to Eretz Yisrael from my year in Kollel, we never imagined that it would continue for 25 years. Baruch Hashem so far. And the reason why most people were not staying when we come for the year or two to learn in Eretz Yisrael, to learn in the Grus after marriage, or to learn in a Kollel or Ramat Eshkol, etc., is because you can't stay in Eretz Yisrael. Where in the world are you going to send your children to school? Where are they going to be nurtured? Where is there going to be an American-style chinuch? And where in the world are they going to get educated in the cheder world, both in Limudei Kodesh and Limudei Chol, a high level of Kodesh, Torah learning, and secular studies? It didn't exist when I came here 25 years ago, so that's why we thought we would stay for a year or two and then head back to the States. Opportunities arise that I was privileged to start Talmud Torah Darchei Noam in Ramat Beit Shemesh about 17 years ago, where we tried to provide for the Anglo Haredi Olim who come to Eretz Yisrael what we call the best of both worlds, both Kodesh and Chol on a high level, in a warm, caring, nurturing atmosphere where Midos and Derech Eretz are paramount, where the boys are nurtured, and there's a Avodas Hashem that's done not me'ira, rather me'ava, ubesimcha, with a geschmack in learning, as they say. We started with 20 kids in the basement of a shul 17 years ago, and Baruch Hashem, we're packed 250 boys today. Now that we've started this, there's 5 other Hadarim who are trying to do the same thing here in Ramat Beit Shemesh, cater to the Anglo Haredi Oleh, English-speaking families coming from America, Canada, England, South Africa, with a tremendous amount of success. So much so that you could really say in the past 25 years, the conversation has changed. While it used to be, you couldn't make Aliya with school-age children because where's the chinuch? The answer is the reason to make Aliya today is because of the chinuch. Because of the chinuch that you're going to get in Eretz Yisrael, in the Chadarim here in Ramat Beit Shemesh. The amount of Torah learning, let's just talk about Yeda, the amount of Torah learning that our boys are exposed to here in Ramat Beit Shemesh, and I'm sure it's all over Israel as well. The way they know the Chumash, who far surpasses their counterparts in America. The thousands of Mishnayos that they know Baal Peh. You can't even compare a cheder child here in Ramat Beit Shemesh to any school in the United States. The way they know how to read Gemara, make a laning on Gemara. My 4th graders can read a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch like they're reading a magazine, lahavdil. The upside of making Aliyah to Ramat Beit Shemesh or any community in Eretz Yisrael, to any cheder in Eretz Yisrael, of the ability to learn, to make a laning, to know how to read a Mishnah Berurah with ease, to know the whole Chumash, Mishnayos, to make an easy laning on Gemara already by the 5th, 6th, or 7th grade, far surpasses their counterparts in America. Certainly, it would be the reason that you would want to make Aliyah is because of the chinuch, the ruchnius, the purity that an Eretz Yisrael Dika cheder boy has compared to other parts of the world. You could far surpasses. It's the reason to make Aliyah is because of the chinuch provided here in Eretz Yisrael. I do know, of course, we deal with Olim every single day. There is that 3 to 6 month hump where we have to have them acquire the language of Hebrew. That's for sure. And depending, the older they come, the harder it is. We do recommend, if you have Aliyah in front of you, make Aliyah earlier rather than later. Certainly before 1st grade, that's the golden rule. But of course, over the last 20 years, we've seen children that came 5th, 6th, 7th grade are doing amazing, are flourishing. Yes, those first few months of having them get that intensive, expensive Ulpan sessions to have the Ulpan catch up with the Rebbe, those few months need to happen. And of course, there'll be some tears along the way at the beginning. You wipe away those tears with a lot of pizza, a lot of ice cream, a lot of positivity, a lot of prizes. There is a golden pot at the end of the rainbow. There is a beautiful Olam HaTorah that they can be exposed to. Just get them that Hebrew as soon as possible. And the schools in Ramat Beit Shemesh really do an amazing job. So that upside of making Aliyah is the reason to come. Point number 2 is definitely you want to place yourself when it comes to a cheder system here in Ramat Beit Shemesh, certainly all over Israel, place yourself, do your research. Place yourself appropriately, hashkafically, and culturally. You want to ask a lot of questions when you are looking at school-age children. Where do the boys go for 9th grade? Where's Limudei Chol in the school? How important is secular studies? How important is to you English, etc.? Where they go for high school? Where they go after high school? Very important questions you need to be asking. And you want to match your family hashkafically as best as you can to the schools that you are choosing. So that goes to point number 3, is you do want to make a pilot trip so you can see the schools. As Rabbi Shulman said so beautifully, the success of your Aliyah will depend on your children. And Mirz Hashem, your children are going to be happy. Mirz Hashem, you'll be happy. That's the most important part. And God forbid if your children are miserable, God forbid you will be miserable. It doesn't matter about Parnasa, it doesn't matter the neighborhoods, it matters about the happiness of your children. So do the research, make the pilot trip, see the schools, speak to the schools, speak to the educators. The most important part of your pilot trip is making appointments to see the various schools that you're going to be looking at to make sure your boys and your girls are situated appropriately and have their avenue towards success. So you want to be asking those questions. You also want to be thinking about your tolerance for integration into the Israeli society at large. A lot of people feel, for example, I know that I want my sons to become warm, adjusted, balanced, b'nei Torah with midos and derech eretz, who love to learn and love to daven and love doing chesed and love their friends and love their shul and love Shabbos. You notice I didn't say becoming Israeli. You notice how the priorities for some people would be different. Some people are like, no, you got to make them Israeli as soon as possible. Some people are, no, you want to have a smooth landing. They'll become Israeli eventually. You want to think about how important it is for you, for how fast you want them to become Israeli and at what price. So think about that. We know that Ramat Beit Shemesh is famous for being the bubble. I love the bubble. Guilty as charged. So you want to make sure that you know what you're comfortable with. You want your children to be 1 foot in the bubble, 2 feet in the bubble, totally out of the bubble, totally Israeli. You want to think about that, talk about that, visit those communities that make it right for you. And last point, I think Mr. Shulman mentioned this again, you did a great speech, is that when it comes to your children's schools, you want to come solution-oriented. What does this mean? Many of you are coming from day schools where your day school had a school psychologist and a school therapist and a school social worker and a preschool director and a principal and a vice principal and a Hebrew principal and an English principal. Guess what? They don't have any of that over here. It's bare bones. You're not going to pay $10,000 to $20,000 a year. You'll pay probably less than $3,000 a year. The private chadarim, you're going to still pay. It won't be free, but it'll be less than $3,000 a year. You won't have any of that. And anything that you want, don't come into the school and say, how come my son's not getting this? And how come my son? That's not the way to do it. What you want to do is you want to come in open-handed, solution-oriented. Say, hey, would I be able to pay for my son to have some extra ulpan tutoring? Would I be able to pay for my son to have a Big Brother program? Would I be able to? You want to come with the solution in hand. And most schools, all schools, if you're coming respectfully with the solution in hand, they're going to come and try to do the best that they can to make sure your children flourish and are nurtured and grow into B'nai Torah, and you're going to have a lot of nachas from them. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Freedman, and thank you for educating my grandchildren.
It's an honor, a privilege, and a present.
Next, we have Rochelle Maron from Modi'in.
I just needed to unmute myself. I feel very much like a fish out of water in this panel. Not only am I a new Ole, we only made Aliya 2 years ago. I'm not American. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not an expert in anything, but I think that I can give some insight, both as a new Ole and as a teacher in the system. As I say, we made Aliya 2 years ago. We followed our Chayal Boded. We have children ranging in age from 24 to 5. And I think that means that we were faced with a similar situation to most of you. Most of the people who are thinking about Aliya have children at various ages and are looking at what is right for them, because at the end of the day, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. We needed to find a place where we felt comfortable, but where we could also integrate. We came to Israel to be Israelis and for our children to be Israelis. But we also wanted a Torani school. We found that in Modi'in. It's kind of the best of both worlds. It's not a major city. It's quite central. There are a lot of options in terms of public transport for people who want to commute. But at the same time, there isn't the attraction or the distraction for the older kids of the clubs and all that kind of nightlife. In terms of education, I've taught in a big school in Modi'in and I've taught in a small school in Modi'in. The school that I'm currently teaching in is Netiv Zvulun. It is very Olim centered. We have approximately 45% of the school is Olim. So a lot of the services at the school are focused at the Olim. The Ulpan teacher is unbelievable. She will give the children what they need, not what they deserve. So like children, you're allocated a certain amount of hours when you make Aliya. And the teacher at Netiv Zvulun doesn't believe in how many hours the children are allocated. They get what they need, which I think is very important. Conversational Hebrew and educational Hebrew is very different. You know, if your child can talk to their friends, that's great. But they need to also be able to read the maths questions. They need to be able to understand the maths and the science terminology. And the focus in the schools is Hebrew by Hebrew. You learn Hebrew by speaking Hebrew. You learn Hebrew by absorbing Hebrew. And that applies to all the subjects. So the most of the schools are going to be like this. They're going to put the children into the classroom, and for the first while, the children are going to be lost. Your children are, I went to my first parents' meeting, and I got into the car afterwards, and I phoned my husband, who wasn't in the country, and I said to him, what have we done? I said to him, I didn't understand one word. How are our children understanding anything? How are they doing this? But they are. They're resilient. And 2 years later, my youngest children are all speaking Hebrew. They have Hebrew friends. They do it. They get on with it. Education, as Yaffa said, is very informal. You're not going to have a conversation with your child where you say to your child at the end of the day, what did you learn in school today? Because they might have played soccer for a while, and they might have done some gardening, and they might have done, and you think to yourself, what is this? Particularly in primary school. You think to yourself, like, how is this education? But it is. The system works. These children go through the system and they learn and they flourish and they love their education. My children love going to school. At Rafi's point, I must just say also is very important that even if you're having a particularly bad day, don't let your children see it. Your children must know that you're feeling positive, that you made the right decision, even if you're having a bad day, because they're going to pick up from whatever you're feeling. So in terms of making a decision about a school, look at the size of the class. Most of your children are coming from very small classes. Look at the size of the classes that your child is going into, because the standard Israeli class is 30, 35 children. If your child has any kind of learning problem or has special needs of any sort, that you need to take that into consideration when you're looking at schools. Does the school have small classes? Does the school take that into consideration? Does the school have counselors? Does the school offer therapies? Those are all questions that you need to be asking. I think that those are the school that I'm teaching at, we're very lucky because it's a small school. It's a family environment. My youngest is in Gun, which happens to be associated to the school, but doesn't fall under the school. But she is ready to go to Kitta Aleph next year in the school because she knows the older kids. The older kids go to visit them. They play. There's a very real family environment, which I know that I had in South Africa, and that was important for me, for my children to have here. As I said, a support team for the children is very important. Some schools focus on the limit, they focus on what the children need. We sit in meetings on a regular basis. Children need to be moved from a small class to a big class. Children need more support. The school needs to be flexible. And just in terms of any educational issues, if your child does have any educational issues, bring any paperwork you have with you. Because if you're arriving just before the school year starts, if you're arriving during the school year, it takes a while to get into the medical system, to get your assessments done. It takes a while to get the appointments. And if you've got the information at hand, then at least the school knows what they're dealing with. The school can start the process. Some of the questions that were submitted, sensory sensitive kids who are easily overwhelmed. The school generally in Israel, the classrooms are very big, they're very loud. And a lot of the education happens in small groups, so there's not a lot of structured learning. So for a child who's easily overwhelmed, that can be problematic, but the teacher needs to be aware of that. I have children who sit in my class with earplugs in. I have children who know that if they need to get up and they need to go outside just to decompress for a little bit, that's fine. You often find children walking around because they need a bit of time out. Most teachers allow that. Most teachers know how to deal with that and accommodate that. Support for English speakers, grade 3 and 5. My son came into the system in grade 3. So apparently, what I was told, Modi'in is very lucky. We're very lucky, Modi'in, because not only do we have an Ulpan department funded by the area, we also have an education consultant who is a representative of both the area and Misrad HaChinuch. So when we arrived, we met with her. She helped us find the right school, the right place, which I know a lot of other cities don't have. But if you can find somebody in the system who can help you, it is crucial. We were advised not to put my son in at the end of grade 2, to put him in rather at the beginning of grade 3. He was young for the year, but it worked for him based on what they saw, based on what they knew about the education system. You need to follow the experts' advice.
Yes. Yeah, Rochelle, thank you very much. You want to summarize in 30 seconds?
So to summarize, you know your children. Find a place that works best for them. Invariably, your children may not all be at the same school because not all schools suit all children.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. And again, thank you very much, Rabbi Freedman and Rafi, for all the insights. I think this will be very useful to many people on this call. So let me move now to NCSY Israel. Now, as we heard about a lot, that the school system, in many cases, school is over 1:30, 2 o'clock. And there are a lot of chugim that children go to, but there are other organizations like NCSY Israel that provide a real support infrastructure, for the children around the country. So let me introduce Rabbi Ginsberg to talk a little bit about NCSY Israel and some of the things that it's doing.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize for speaking quick. We're actually in the middle of an incredible event now for teens with Torah learning and workshops, and it's really exciting. So you're catching me in a very opportune time, but really a pleasure to be here today, to be a part of this panel this afternoon, this morning, whatever we like to call it. So again, my name is Yosef Ginsberg, co-founder and regional director for NCSY Israel. We started about 10 years ago, and we started because there was a hole in the system. There was a hole in the system because
I think we may have a technical difficulty here.
It seems to be frozen on his end.
That is in Israel. The expectation is to give, that you're ready to give back. You're ready to do more and not just receive. And while there is immense power in that, in the leadership role, where right after high school you go straight into the army, teens are still in a place of the kabel, of receiving, and that's not how the system is here, or I should say was here. There are so many youth groups in Israel, Baruch Hashem, they're all incredible. They really are. There's Bnei Akiva, there's Ezra, there's Tzofim. You could really go up and down the whole country, and you basically wouldn't find a community without multiple youth groups. It's a very unique thing. But the way it runs in Israel is that you have teenagers running youth groups for elementary school kids, whereas in most places outside of Israel, it's not only for elementary school kids, but you have also for teenagers. But here the teenagers are meant to lead, are meant to step up, which again is very powerful. But let's say you just moved to Israel. Let's say you're not the leader type and you want to do a thing here or there, maybe it's some chesed, but you're still a teenager. You still need to receive. So we opened up as a general spot for English speaking teens in Israel because, I mean, let's face it, it's hard enough and it's crazy already being a teen anywhere in the world. And now add being an immigrant to the mix. And we don't consider that when we make Aliya because, well, we speak English and maybe we have a job, maybe we have, we're normal. We think immigrants, we think like black and white, we think like living in a tent somewhere, but we're immigrants. It is what it is. And while that doesn't always translate, maybe financially, this and that, it translates in every other way. And that's socially, that's culturally, and it's a very challenging thing for anyone, let alone a teen and that much harder, especially when the support system you have, and that is your family, doesn't get it because they also grew up somewhere else. And that support system is also something different. So we opened up in order to give teens a place here, to help find their place here, not just so they can have a place, but their place of giving, their place of that. And we're the only youth group in Israel where teens, mamash, where teens are the ones who are the receivers, who are the chanichim, who are the participants, and all of our staff are post-army, posher lumi, because that's their goal, to push them to be one with it, to push them to give back to Israel more, but also to feel like they don't have to change to be a part of it so much. They just need to find their spot, and they have their spot, and they have their space. So that's something we do. Now, in terms of making Aliya with a teen, this is something, Baruch Hashem, we have 500 teens. We just had a Shabbaton with 250 teens, and every single type of teen, from Ranana to Ramat Beit Shemesh. And you could imagine the diversity, which is something so beautiful, and also the challenges, the diverse challenges that we receive. And just seeing so many years, we're entering our 10th year now of thousands of teens who have been through our programming, and speaking to so many parents. I've seen a couple things that really just fit in with, well, what can we learn from this? What can we gain from this? And so I'll share some of those with you, and I'll do that and pass it on to our next participant. And that is number one. If you're making Aliya with a teen, make Aliya with a teen. Don't make Aliyah and drag your teen. It's important that your teen is a part of this process. It's important that your child is making Aliyah with you and they feel that they're a part of it and they're also making that decision. And sometimes that might mean waiting a couple more months. Sometimes, now it doesn't mean you're not in charge, you're the parent, and sometimes we need to put our foot down. But don't feel like you're just dictating to them. Teens want to be able to make decisions, and we need to be able to give them a little bit of space in the decisions that we make together. And that's a really, really, really important thing. What for a person who wants to make Aliyah with a teenager, or really any child, as you get older, it gets sometimes more challenging, but not always. That's number one. Number two is understand that teens are teens no matter where they're from. Now, the easiest thing to blame always is the very fact that we made Aliyah, that we moved to Israel. But in most cases, a teen is going to be a teen wherever you put them. And if they're having trouble in school, it's exasperated in Israel because of all the other challenges. But it's something that's also the teen has trouble studying, or the teen has trouble this and that, because we've seen both sides as well. So take it with a little bit of grain of salt of how much blame to put on Israel and how much blame to put on yourself as well. A teen is going to have those challenges. We can get through those challenges. We could rock them. We could have an amazing time. We could really connect even more so because the challenges are so much greater. We could become so much stronger. And therefore, it's so important for us when making Aliyah with teens to look at them as teens, not Israeli teens, not as foreign, not as something. And don't give them that excuse either. Don't give them the excuse to say, oh, it's just because I moved to Israel, you moved to Israel, this or that. It's true, but it's not necessarily the answer. The bottom line is you can do this and you can rock this. And when teens notice and realize that, they own it and they really have it. And it's not easy, but it's not easy in America either. It's not easy in Canada. It's hard. It's hard being a teen. It's hard being anywhere. It's hard being in this world sometimes. But when we rock it, we rock it. And the third thing is, and I'll just end with this. First off, everyone should come join us, but obviously preaching to the crowd in a meeting like this, that's of course, but it's so important that when you're making Aliyah with your teen, and again, you've sat with them and you're making that decision with them, what can you want? What tools will you need? What this and that? And sometimes the answer will be no to some of those things. But also it's important that you're doing this and you're straight up with it. This is going to be hard. This is going to be challenging, but because I'm also making that as a family, as a group, as going through it together, and not seeing it as foreign. Oh, the Israelis. Oh, they're that. It's not something else. It's you also. Hebrew is the main language, but there's hundreds of languages throughout this country. Who's counting, right? So again, just those three things, a couple of things to just make Aliyah with your teen. Remember that teenagers are teenagers no matter where they are. And to really, with that, make Aliyah together and go through those challenges together as a unit, as a family, and joining the Jewish people, not fighting against them. So thank you again for having me join, and hopefully hope to see you all in the land of Israel soon.
Thank you very much, Yossi. Let me now move over to Marc Rosenberg from Nefesh B'Nefesh. And you're all very familiar with Nefesh B'Nefesh. Everyone is. And now, we've had a lot of inspiring words from educators, from professionals, from ravs of new communities. And there are a lot of very specific questions that I'm sure many of you do have. And really, Nefesh B'Nefesh is the place, to go to get those questions answered. So let me pass it over to Marc and let him give us some words of encouragement and what are the next steps for a group like this when it comes to Aliyah.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Bloom, and Yasher Koach, also to all the panelists. It's amazing, Rabbi Markowitz especially, a special community. It's hard to add on. There's been so many incredible tips that have been shared today, so I'm going to be careful just to try and summarize what I think is the essential 3 takeaways that I think each person here should consider. Number one is you really have to think and carefully research your Aliyah. Don't just stammer or talk around your Shabbos table about it. It's important to gather some of the questions and things you heard about, talk to people. Please talk to the professionals at Nefesh B'Nefesh. One of the things I've learned over the past year in speaking with focus groups that some people think that Nefesh B'Nefesh is great once you've decided to make Aliyah. But if you're not sure, then it's a whole different ballgame. But we actually are there for every step of the process, and we have incredible resources and context. Also, it's important to think that excuse me, almost 80,000 North Americans have moved to Israel in the past 21 years. There's an incredible network of people. Many of them have been featured here, who can help connect you to those resources. It's important to speak to people. And I want to add on to also Rabbi Ginsberg just gave some great advice about bringing your team. Israelis are very dugri. They're very straightforward. You probably met those Israelis who ask you, how much is your house? How much did you pay for your car? How much do you earn? You need to become very direct in understanding. If you want to question, what do you like about living in Ramat Beit Shemesh? What don't you like? What do you like about the school? What don't you like? You want to ask people, where else were you considering? You want to be very direct and be able to listen to these answers. And that's how you'll be able to gather the information that you need to it. I received some of the questions that Rabbi Bloom shared with you. Some of them are very, very specific. I encourage you to reach out to me or call the hotline, come to one of our meetings, build a plan, and don't hide behind the hard questions. Tackle the hardest question first, whether it's finances. We have a great budgeting site that can explain to you what we think your expenses are going to be. Employment advisors and educational specialists. There's a lot of resources out there that can help ground to figure out what your plan is. Tip number 2 is understanding the documents involved. Everyone has to prove their identity. Everyone has to prove their Jewish lineage. It doesn't matter if you're the rabbi of the shul. Even the rabbi of the shul had to prove their identity. I'll just point out, because I see that Rabbi Goldin Jr. is here, but I remember when Rabbi Goldin Sr. made Aliya, he too had to get the rabbi's letter on official letterhead for saying that he's Jewish, born to Jewish parents. All of these documents are a headache, and you have to understand that it's just a headache. So if you're going to get them, most of the documentation is good forever. Your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, and getting them apostilled, getting them certified on a state level. Gathering them will make the process that much smoother. And you have to understand that this is part of the technical process, because there's a lot of identity theft, and they want to make sure that everyone is who they are and they get the rights and benefits they deserve. So you should really get ahead of that and understand it. And that leads into the third thing, is understanding the timeline involved. Nefesh B'Nefesh encourages people who are thinking about making Aliyah to start the application about 10 to 12 months before the first date that they're thinking about coming. There's no commitment to filling out the application, and you could fill it out. You can get approved, and you can always push it off. It's not a problem to do that. But if you have a 3-year plan, do not spend the first next year and a half gathering those birth certificates. Work on where you're going to live and what are you going to do and what are you going to earn. The planning is really, really important, so that you have a good sense of what you're going to earn and what you're going to be and what you're going to do. There have been tremendous comments here about the why of Aliyah and the spirit and the educational values. That we don't have to talk about the weather and the people and the spirit, the resilience of Am Yisrael right now, especially in the period that we're in. It's important to understand that it's very, very practical. And I actually think that having been to Fairlawn and was just at the parade in New York, I think that most of the people that I met in New York have the same exact ideology that I have when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. I was just practically ready to make that decision. So if you are exploring that practicality, it's important to take the lessons today and to build that plan moving forward. And I think this Aliyah, this Israel Inspiration Initiative is a great way to stir that up, to have a conversation with your Rav, with the Mechanchim, and with a lot of the contacts here, to make sure that you have a plan to see whether it's going to be possible for you, and whether it's when your nest gets empty, whether you're bringing teenagers, whether your kids are in elementary school, or if you're sending your kid to Shana Ba'aretz and you're raising your kids that they want to live in Israel, to understand the resources involved, that you can make the most educated decision. Our heart is with you. We're here. It is our zchut to be able to help you in that process. And I also like to mention this, that Rabbi Fest and Tony Gilbert started Nefesh B'Nefesh, calling it because every Nefesh has its own uniqueness to it. Everyone's Aliyah has their own unique part to it. So we appreciate all of those individualness as it comes together to build Klal Yisrael. So I wish you lots of success, and we look forward to answering your question and being able to help in any way we can.
Thank you very much, Marc. And again, please reach out to Nefesh B'Nefesh. The amount of resources they have there are unbelievable. When I made Aliyah, I kind of use them almost on a daily basis. Okay, let me just kind of sum up and kind of give you some next steps, because I think the next steps are really very, very important. I just want to make you aware that there are some communities, Fairlawn may be one of them, that may want to consider that they are looking to actually make Aliyah as a group. That is clearly an option. In fact, there are a whole bunch of groups that have actually gone and made Aliyah together. And on this chart, you'll see a couple of ones that have been very successful, from Yardley, Pennsylvania to Afula, from Lakewood to Beit Shemesh. from Deal to Netanya, from Teaneck to Ramat Beit Shemesh to Springfield to Carmel Malache. Maybe a group here in Fair Lawn is interested in doing something like that. So the next steps that I want to make you aware of, if you guys have any questions that you'd like us to answer, please don't hesitate to email either myself or Brian. Brian is going to be the contact within Fair Lawn. Brian is planning to set up meetings every 4 to 6 weeks to get groups of people from Fair Lawn and from the areas around Fair Lawn to talk about Aliya. We found that, I found that in the community that I grew up in Highland Park, Edison, we did something like this 20 years ago. And I would say roughly about 60 families bought real estate, and about 2/3 of those families have made Aliya over these past several years. We are also looking for volunteers for other communities. I've gotten phone calls from communities in Long Island, in the Upper West Side, in a couple of places in New Jersey who like to do something very similar to this. So if you are on the today's call and you're from any of those communities or any other community who would like to do a similar Israel Inspiration Initiative for your town, where we'll be tying together with your Rav and people within the Aliya community, be it Nefesh B'Nefesh or Mizrahi or Young Israel, please contact me, and we'll be glad to work with you to create such an initiative within your community. Again, let me thank all the speakers for the very inspiring words. If I didn't make Aliya, I'd probably make Aliya just because of what I heard today. And I got to thank you in the audience for listening and spending a good part of your Sunday morning with us. I look forward to hearing from you. You will be getting a recording of today's meeting, and we'll also be sending out a questionnaire so we can focus in on those areas that we need to improve and strengthen those areas that you think we did know pretty well in. Again, thank you very much. Have a Shavua Tov and have a wonderful Yontif.
Shavua Tov, Chag Sameach, everyone.
Chag Sameach, everybody.
Thank you, Paul.